2023 will be considered a successful season for the Rams if that's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your two-time Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you want to check out the video version of the show, find us over on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button. Just past 7,000 subscribers, all thanks to you. Trying to get to 8K before the season, and let us know, what do you consider to be a successful season for the Rams in 2023. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMac_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade. The Lakers for SI, the Dodgers for Dodgers Nation, and now I'm covering the Rams for Locked On. And a reminder that this episode of Locked On Rams is brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He's entering his 8th year covering the team, the people's champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him at Travis Rogers. Now, Travis, we got a jam-packed show for today. We're going to talk about the Rams being an underdog. Sean McVay had some very interesting comments about the running backs room. We're going to talk about just some nuggets from the start of camp. But first, I don't know if you saw Aaron Donald, man. My man looking swole, showing up like he's the Incredible Hulk. I don't know if he had sleeves on. He just flexed and it turned into a tank top. And he ate a cinder block and a bowl of nails for breakfast. But, yeah, man, he was looking jacked.
He always does. Like, that's one of the things about Aaron Donald. Not is he just a great player and everything that he's brought to the team, but you know he's going to show up and be ready to go. That is not a man to be messed with. And if everybody took his approach, the Rams would be in probably multiple time Super Bowl champions year after year after year. He's amazing.
Yeah, look, he was sending a message. I also thought it was pretty funny. The Rams social media team, they asked the players how many pairs of underwear they brought to training camp. Stetson Bennett said he brought 24 that he stopped off at Walmart. Kobe Durant said 60. Aaron Donald said none.
Yeah.
Donald said none. I don't know what to make of that.
Some guys like to just let the breeze blow, and that's fine too. Well, look, whatever Aaron Donald likes is fine by me. He gets to do whatever he wants.
Exactly. He's the Incredible Hulk. But
60
let's dive into this
seems like
first.
too much.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, that seems like a lot. I'm sure they'll do your laundry. You don't have to bring a new pair in every day.
Yeah, and also you can like fold them inside out. You know, there's all these tricks you can use. I mean, come on now. Right?
Exactly.
But Travis, let's dive into this first topic here because Sean McVay, of course, there's a lot of platitudes. It was coach speak. We know we're fluent in Sean McVay, the master of saying nothing while saying everything at the same time. But I did think there were some interesting comments. And he was asked about a successful season for the Rams this season. And his response to that was, well, I think continuous improvement. I think to be able to see that growth, to see how we handle a 17-game season, because the reality in this sport is, you know, you're going to have to be able to navigate through a storm, and being able to do that, I think, is going to be one of the separators, and how that is reflected isn't exclusive to wins and losses. So that sounds like a guy to me that wants a lot of experience for young players, for rookies, and you're not tying this to a 10, 12, 14 win season, making the playoffs. I think they're going week by week. They want to see incremental improvements, and I think they're going to take it from there.
When was the last time you heard a coach talk about their season not being defined by wins and losses? Right? I mean, that tells you that's all that your season is defined by. This is not Little League where we're building character. This is not high school where you're looking for some extracurricular activities. This is not college where maybe you're apprenticing for a professional career, or more likely you're finding a way to pay for school. It's pro sports. It's nothing but wins and losses. It's the only thing that you're measured by. Now, I'm not saying that he's under the gun or anything like that, but the mere fact that he put that out in the universe, the mere fact that he's talking about the fact that, it won't only be wins and losses, I think reflects that he knows what's coming down. It's the same thing that I've been suggesting for the last several months. This team is in transition. That's not a bad thing, but it's a true thing. They're in transition. This is a team that will look, I'm sure, pretty good at times, that will look pretty rough at others. And I think Sean McVay is just kind of setting expectations in a reasonable spot in training camp.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he's trying to send a message, and that message is that this isn't the Super Bowl or bust Rams teams that we've seen in the past. This is a team that has a lot of youth, a lot of inexperience, tons of rookies, and yes, they have 3 superstars. You have the best defensive player on the planet in Aaron Donald. You have a franchise quarterback in Matthew Stafford. You have one of the best receivers in the league in Cooper Kupp. But other than that, lots of rookies, lots of inexperience. You don't have those other stars, the Jalen Ramseys. You don't have those veterans like Andrew Whitworth. So he understands what a Super Bowl roster looks like. He's coached those teams. But having said that, this is Sean McVay. This is the same guy that took that 2017 Rams team that was coming off a 4-12 year. He led them to the playoffs. They won the division. They won 11 games. Yes, you don't have as many veterans on this team as that team had, but he knows that he can get it done. And sometimes the best, most successful people in the world are also the most delusional. And I mean that in the best possible way, because they know they can accomplish and do things that not many believe that they can do. And I think in his heart of hearts, Sean McVay realizes that if things break right, this team can make the playoffs. But if it doesn't, hey, you can't consider this season a failure, because there's other ways that this team can have a successful year that doesn't involve making the playoffs.
I think you're right. And look, Sean McVay is more aware of the situation that he's walking into than anybody else, right? Sean McVay was on the fence about whether he wanted to do this or not. And I don't think that his roster is a surprise to him. I don't think that their position in the NFL is a surprise to him. I think, if anything, he's probably reinvigorated by the whole idea of, let's start from scratch. Let's get this thing going. And maybe it's not square one, because you got Donald, Kupp, and Stafford, so that's a pretty good building foundation. But I think he knows what's coming up. And whether you want to call it developmental, whether you want to call it a transition year, or whatever it is, he knows that this is, let's see what we have. Let's see what we can work with moving forward. Let me see if I can find new ways to coach these guys, new ways to manage a staff, new ways to get through a 17-game season like he's talking about, and get ready for Sean McVay 2.0, which, the 1.0 ended with a Super Bowl championship. This is 2.0. Let's see what it looks like. And they're starting to build it right now. And look, Sean McVay is not going to come out and say anything explicit like we're getting ready for 2024 or 2025, but he's a smart guy. He might be one of the smartest guys that this league has ever seen. He knows what's coming up. He knows what this roster is. He knows what the competition is. And look, they're not a 1 or a 2-win team, but this idea that they might be a 5, 6, or 7-win team is very realistic, and he knows that, and he's going to use it to his advantage. And maybe that fruit isn't on the tree until next season or the season after that, but it's coming.
For sure. And that's what this year was about. That's why I'm happy they did what they did, which was not very much this offseason, because you had to take a step back to take a step forward in 2024. You had to bite that bullet. You had to pay off that credit card debt so you can restore that credit score, so you can make some big acquisitions. You can put some key pieces around Stafford, Kupp, and Donald next season. So for me, this season will be a successive one. They stay as healthy as they possibly can. You don't see the injuries along the offensive line. You don't see injuries to the core members. If this team stays healthy, that to me is going to go a long way. To me, that really is number one. And two, you don't trade Aaron Donald. You don't trade Matthew Stafford. You don't trade Cooper Kupp. If people call, you just hang up the phone. I want them to hear dial tone, right? I don't want them trading those guys, because I'm confident with the resource they have after this year, you can still make 1, maybe even 2 runs with this team. And then 3, hit on as many of these rookies, hit on as many of these young players as you possibly can. Have the young guys take steps forward, the Kobe Durant's, the Tutu Atwells, hopefully he proves himself, Ernest Jones. Have these players really solidify themselves in this core moving forward. And then the rookies too. Does Steve Avila establish himself as a foundational member of this offensive line? A guy that you think can man that line for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, hopefully. Can they find some other pieces? Will Puka Nacua really be the Robert Woods 2.0? Will he really be Bobby Trees? Will they hit on him? Will Zach Evans really be the steal of the draft? How will Byron Young look? How will Kobe Turner? How will all these other rookies look? Because you're not going to hit on all of them, but if you hit on 4 or 5 of them, that to me would be a win. So those are really the big things for this team. Now, if they make the playoffs, great. Do I think they're going to make the playoffs? In my heart of hearts, I really do. Does my brain tell me how inexperienced this defense is? It absolutely does, but there is a path to the playoffs, but I'm still looking at this year as a successful year, even if they don't, if certain things break the right way.
Yeah, look. This is what makes the NFL. I was talking about this on my Travis and Sliwa show on ESPN 710 here in LA. That this is what makes the NFL the NFL. Nobody knows anything. There is a universe that exists where the Rams are pretty good. It's not super likely, but it's not impossible. Every year there's a team that we think that's going to be good that's bad. Every year that we think there's a team that's going to be bad that's good. It happens every single year, and sometimes it's more than one. And I think that the Rams have to be kind of one of those candidates to think that, again, like we talk about the offensive line every day, the everydayers will know this. It's the first 10 weeks of the season. If they can get through the first 10 weeks of the season about 500, they're in a pretty interesting spot going into the second half of the season. If they get through the first 10 weeks of the season and they got 1 or 2 wins, then I think we know what's coming up after that. But there's a chance. It's a narrow path. And some of the things that we found out yesterday about Purdy being up in San Francisco and being ready to go, I think makes that path even less likely. But it's the NFL, and you never know what's going to happen.
Coming up in our second segment, more from Sean McVay. We're going to discuss his comments on the running backs room on Cam Akers. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
All right, this Locked On Rams episode is sponsored by BetterHelp, right? How often have you gotten stuck? And I don't mean like stuck. I mean in your head where you just kind of keep going over the same thing over and over. What's going on with my career? What's going on with my relationships? What is going on in my world that I just can't stop thinking about over and over again? And sometimes in life, you just get hit with those tough choices. And the way to get out of that rut, the way to move forward isn't always clear. Like I said, whether you're talking about career, relationships, or anything else, therapy can help you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life so you can move forward with confidence and excitement, right? You want to feel good about these things. The more you practice it, the easier it gets, and therapy can help you do that. So if you are thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
And we're off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And here in our second segment, Travis, we're talking more about the running backs room because he was asked about Cam Akers and some of these other players. Had some very interesting comments. He said, what is Cam Akers excellent at? Continuing to figure that out. How does that complement Kyren Williams? Being able to bring Sony Michel back in the mix. And so those are things that are always unfolding. There was a lot of things that we kind of tried and attempted in the offseason program. So I think really the thing that stands out there is him talking about Kyren Williams, because Kyren Williams is someone where he's really spoken glowingly of. He's been very high on. We know that he wasn't able to have a full offseason last year. He was dealing with the injury. And you're talking about a Rams running game that ranked 28th, 97.7 yards per game last season. So it does feel like both guys are going to get opportunities, and it's not just going to be completely given to Cam Akers.
Well, okay. So we'll get to Kyren Williams in a second. I got to go back to make sure that I heard what you said correctly. He was asked what he does excellently, and his response was, I'm continuing to figure that out. That's not good. Let me ask everybody that's listening to this podcast right now. If somebody went to your boss and said, what does Doug McCain do well? What does Travis Rogers do well? And the boss's response was, I'm continuing to figure that out. How do you feel about your life? How do you feel about your job? How do you feel about where you are in this situation? How do you feel about what's going on in your career? I wouldn't feel great about that. I would like to hear the answer. Well, he's a hard worker. He's an innovative thinker. He's a problem solver. He works well with others. And my gosh, he kills it every single day he comes through that door. Not, I'm continuing to figure that out. So if I'm Cam Akers, I am scared to death after hearing that answer. That's the part that jumps out at me more than anything else. As far as, hey, what does he do well? Well, let's talk about how it fits with Kyren Williams. Oh, the only thing missing is dun, dun, dun. This is bad news for Cam Akers. This doesn't make me feel good for him at all. I'm not surprised, right? This is a guy that the relationship between Sean McVay and Cam Akers, to put it in its best terms, is complicated, right? This is a complicated relationship between these two guys. If Cam Akers plays well, he's going to play. But that answer right there does not make me feel great about Cam Akers on day one of training camp.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, we know they've had a tumultuous relationship in the past as far as anytime that you get some competition. We had Henderson that he dealt with. And, of course, we know we talked about in depth what happened last season with Cam Akers and this organization. But, yeah, I think you kind of have to take in a little bit of a context there. I think that Sean McVay is also saying that there's other guys that have talent on this team. He knows that he can't just do it with one running back. I think that Cam Akers is going to get the runway. But I'm with you on that one, especially with Cam Akers, the guy that hasn't dealt with competition very well. And you were hoping this season with the runway that he would run with it. It almost reminds me of the meme, you versus the guy she told you not to worry about. And the guy's kind of holding his girlfriend's hand and looking back. It almost feels like it's always Sean McVay with Cam Akers, that he's supposed to have this great relationship. He's supposed to depend on him, but then he's mentioning other running backs and guys that get opportunities. So, yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how it pans out. And look, the beauty of all of this is that Cam Akers has put himself in a great position coming off a strong finish last season, 300-yard games. We've talked all about it, and that he's going to get his opportunity, and it's going to be a meritocracy. The best running back is going to get the snaps. It's not like they're owed anything to Cam Akers, even though this could be his last season on the Rams. McVay also said, but Sony Michel's professionalism, his toughness, his ability to be able to compete in both phases, and then I think he's a great compliment. You know, we got a lot of confidence in Cam and Kyren Williams. So, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to see him talk about Kyren Williams as much as he does.
Yeah, look, the relationship with Cam Akers and Sean McVay has an expiration date. Only Sean McVay knows what that expiration date is at this point. And they do have other options, whether it's Sony Michel, whether it's Kyren. Look, Kyren Williams was somebody that they were very high on last year, and it just never really got a chance to get off the ground. He got hurt. I want to say it was the opening play of the season that he got hurt on, and that was it. And he never really came back to the form that I think that the Rams were hoping him to. He got back in later in the season. Wasn't quite the player that I think that they were hoping he would be. Coming off an injury, I think could give him the benefit of the doubt right there. I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities. I think he's a pretty good player. I think that Sean McVay really does like him. I don't think he would, if you said, you know, what does Kyren Williams do well? I don't think you'd get I'm continuing to figure that out. I think you'd get a more explicit list of what he does well. That's a position that is important, but I think it's further down the list. I think it's about that offensive line first. I think it's about that second and third and beyond wide receivers. I think it's the health of Matthew Stafford, and then who performs at running back. I think you're going to continue to see a revolving door there.
I do too, and I think that it is important to acknowledge the fact that McVay does like Kyren Williams, that he's high on him. And look, at Notre Dame, we saw he was a standout at 139 yards on 35 carries, had 4 yards per carry. And look, I think the game that stands out to me is game against Kansas City. You saw he was able to catch the ball out of the backfield, had 3 catches for 25 yards, 35 yards on the ground. And yeah, he was on the physically unable to perform list. He broke his foot in practice, so he really hasn't gotten the opportunity to be fresh and healthy for an entire year. But also another thing I want to point out too, not a lot of talk about Zach Evans. And I will say, what is he supposed to say? Okay, I'm basing it off his highlights in college, off his college stats. So really not too much to make out of that. But this is also a guy that doesn't like playing his rookies as much. So makes you wonder, can Zach Evans step into that role? I've been very high on him. I hope he gets an opportunity, but it'll be interesting to see what the Rams do with him.
Yeah, Evans' role will be determined based on what the guys ahead of him do, right? The Akers is probably going to get the first crack at it. If it's not Akers, maybe it's Michel. If it's not Michel, it's probably Kyren Williams. And if none of those things really hit, then Zach Evans gets a chance to maybe put himself in there, because you're right, Doug. When you look at the way that Sean McVay has operated, very rarely has a rookie taken a prominent role in what it is that they're doing. And especially on the offensive side of the ball, where what Sean McVay does, I don't know if it's incredibly complicated by NFL standards, but it needs incredibly precise. You need to know what it is that you're supposed to be doing in these situations. And rookies they're just behind the curve. They just haven't been in the league. They haven't been in the program long enough to kind of pick that stuff up. So he'll get an opportunity, but not before the more seasoned players get theirs.
Yeah, I do want to say the Rams are doing their part to help the running back job crisis in America, trading up to get Zach Evans. So you have to feel good about that. The Rams doing that part. And before we head to our final segment here, I just want to point out, too, that Cam Akers, another guy looking swole during the arrivals. I mean, this is a guy that said his weight is way, way up. So he was laughing about that. So it looks like he's put himself in a great position physically to have a great year. I hope he has a breakout season. It would go a long way to helping this offense take the next step. So let's hope that happens. But coming up here in our final segment, the Rams are underdogs heading into the 2023 season. And Sean McVay had something to say about that. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. And welcome back to Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your two-time Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, your team every day. And I also want to give a special shout out to our everyday listeners who rock with us every single day here on Locked On Rams. We appreciate you. And you can also be an everyday member. Just watch the show every day, listen to the show every day, and you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. But here, Travis, in our final segment, we're talking about some underdog Rams because Sean McVay was asked about the odds makers picks for this season, and he told him that the Rams were picked to win 6.5 games. And Sean McVay, he laughed it off and he said, quote, "They don't believe in us." So it feels like there's going to be an underdog mentality, a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to go out there and try to prove the experts wrong this season.
Yeah, these guys know, right? The players know, the coaches know, Vegas knows. They know what they're putting out on the field. And it's not that you don't try. It's not that you don't go out there and compete. It's not any of those sorts of things. What it is you know what your talent level is relative to the rest. The Rams know that they're underdogs. That's not a bad thing in sports, right? This nobody believes in us. Nobody expects us to win. There's something liberating, for lack of a better word, about that just go out there and play. I think there are certain guys that feel disrespected, and that fuels them for the rest of their careers because they weren't drafted in the right spot, or they were told they were too slow, or they were too short, or whatever it is, and it leads them to become these great players. I think that organizations and teams can draw some identity from that and become you don't believe in us, we'll watch this. That's fine. But the reason that people don't believe in these guys typically is because there's a reason not to. The Rams need to prove people wrong. You can take the nobody believes in us, but when that ball goes up against the Seahawks in week 1, it doesn't matter anymore. You got to go play. And whether or not they're ready to go play or not, we'll see. They're under-talented relative to what they've been over the last few years. They are underdogs for very good reason. Doesn't mean they won't win. It just means they don't have the horses that they have in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's what the experts are looking at. I think that's what the odds makers are looking at. They're looking at the fact that this defense last year had the 7th highest payroll in the NFL. This year, they're dead last at under $60 million. So, yeah, there's a reason why they let their hands in their pockets during free agency, because there wasn't a lot of money to spend in those pockets. And they realized from a roster build standpoint that, yes, you have a top-heavy roster with some of the best players in the league with that core of Donald, Cup, and you got, of course, Matthew Stafford, but still, they need these rookies to hit, and that's really the unknown. If these rookies hit, these young players are able to have some success, things could definitely break right for the Rams. But I will say, too, this is the franchise that had the 1999 St. Louis Rams, who were a 150-1 underdog entering the season to win the Super Bowl. They, of course, go on to beat the Titans 23-16. So you never know, but still, I do think from a mentality standpoint, that's the right attitude to have. I mean, at this level, though, Travis, I always say, look, these guys are all miracles. They're all statistical miracles to get to this level. All these guys are motivated. All these guys are motivated by money, by success, by legacy. You don't get to the NFL by accident. So these guys already have their bucket filled with that at this point.
They've got 40 rookies coming into camp. 40. It's about half the roster is coming in that has no NFL experience. Some of those guys are going to be good. So some of those guys are going to be good players that have a chance to come in and make some noise in this league. It's just a matter of whether or not making noise is enough to win games. I think this is really important for Rams fans to kind of understand what this is. If stuff breaks right, then you're talking 99 Rams. If there is a Kurt Warner, and I'm not talking a quarterback, but if there's somebody like, wait, who's this guy? And then after a few weeks, you go, is he as good as he looks? And then after half the season, like, he might be better than he looks, then great. Then you take it and you run. Otherwise, this is a let's find some pieces that we can use moving forward type of season. I think everybody's on board with that. They're going to be underdogs. I think that when the schedule came out originally, I think the Rams are favored just in straight line in one game, right? One game. I think they're favored over the Washington Commanders when they come to town here. Otherwise, the Rams are going to be underdogs, in Vegas, and that is what it is. You're going to have to prove people wrong, and hopefully they do.
Hopefully they do. Hopefully they shock the world. I think this team still has talent to surprise some folks out there, but it remains to be seen. Backs against the wall. I do love this mindset. I hope this gives them the fire to go out there and prove everyone wrong, make a run at the postseason, but we will see. But we are just getting started here in training camp, just getting warmed up. We're going to have nuggets all week long. We are just getting started. The football is in the air, Travis. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And, of course, that man is Mr. Travis Rogers, the people's champ. You can follow him on Twitter at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house is Locked On Rams house?